Right now, some store shelves are quietly being cleared out across the United States. Not rice, not beans, not the things everyone talks about, but the things you have never thought about. And the most dangerous part is, you will not notice. The shelves still look full. Everything still looks normal. That is exactly how shortages begin. In 2026 alone, nearly 8,000 grocery stores are expected to close. But that is not the biggest problem. The problem is, what is disappearing from the stores that are still open, and why they are not coming back the way they used to. One of them has doubled in price in less than 2 years. Another can last for thousands of years, but is becoming harder to find. These are 10 foods quietly disappearing, and those who prepare have already seen it coming. By the end of this video, you will understand what is really happening and why you need to pay attention right now. 10. Canned sardines and mackerel. One of the first things to disappear from shelves is not rice, not beans, but something you think is always there. And by the time you realize it is missing, it is usually too late to buy it like before. 3 years ago, a can of sardines in olive oil was about $2. Today, that same product easily reaches $4 or more, doubled. But price is not the biggest concern. The real concern is you cannot be sure the next time you come back, it will still be there. This week, the shelf is full. Next week, it is partially missing. The week after, that empty space is still there, just wider. No one announces it, no one explains it. And that is how things begin to change. Not all at once, but little by little. And that is not a coincidence. It is a pattern. And it is repeating. Fishing grounds around the world have begun to see declining sardine and mackerel yields. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Fish populations are dropping. Ocean temperatures are changing. Migration patterns are being disrupted. When supply is squeezed while demand does not fall, the outcome is always the same. Prices rise, availability becomes inconsistent, and items slowly disappear from places you once assumed would always have them. But the reason those who prepare truly pay attention to this is not about price. It is about what is inside. A can of sardines is not just protein. It is protein with fat and omega-3. 3 things most other stored foods do not have. Rice does not have it. Beans barely have it. Canned vegetables do not have it either. And your body does not wait months to respond. Within just a few weeks, you will notice the difference. Harder to focus, getting tired faster. Your mood is not as stable as before. Not because you lack food, but because you lack the right thing. The most common mistake is thinking any canned fish is the same. Tuna is more familiar, easier to eat, so many people choose it. But when your diet becomes limited for a long period, small nutritional differences turn into a very large gap. Another mistake is choosing the cheapest option, packed in water. You save a few dollars, but you are removing the very fat that helps your body absorb vitamins and maintain stable energy. And there is an even simpler mistake: buying it and then leaving it there. When you finally need it, you realize you are not used to the taste. And by then, you no longer have time to adapt. Canned sardines and mackerel can maintain good quality for 3 to 5 years, sometimes longer if stored properly. But that only holds true when you keep them in a stable environment. High temperatures, direct sunlight, or humidity will quietly reduce quality over time. A can left in a hot garage throughout the summer is not the same as one kept in a cool kitchen cabinet. The oil inside will oxidize faster, the flavor will change, and when you open it, you will realize it is no longer what you expected. Keep them in a dry, cool place with stable temperature. Avoid direct light. Occasionally check for cans that are swollen, rusted, or heavily dented. If opened and not fully used, transfer to a sealed container and use within 1 or 2 days. These small details do not make a difference immediately, but they determine whether you can rely on this food source when everything else starts to run short. You do not need to buy a lot at once. No need to fill a cart. Just add a few cans to your basket each time you shop. Eat them occasionally to get used to it. Use the older ones first, replace with new ones later. Do it long enough, and you will have something most people around you do not. A stable source of protein and fat that is ready and truly useful when options begin to shrink. You do not need to like it right now. You just need to not wait until you no longer have a choice. 9. Canned tomatoes. You would not think a can of tomatoes matters until you cook a meal without it and realize everything you eat starts to taste the same. For decades, this has been one of the most stable items in the supermarket. Cheap, always available. No one worried about it. But that is exactly what makes it dangerous when it starts to disappear. In the United States, about 95% of processed tomatoes, the kind used for paste, sauce, and canned tomatoes, come from a single region. Central Valley, California. Not many places, not spread out, almost all in one location. And when that location has problems, the entire system has no way to adjust. Prolonged drought has tightened water supply. Labor costs have risen. Farm operating costs have increased. Many small farmers have started to reduce output, even leave the business. At the same time, rising metal packaging costs have forced food companies to be selective about what they produce. And you know what they do under pressure? They prioritize higher profit products. They cut lower-priced items. Those small cans of tomatoes are exactly what gets cut first. The result is, you begin to see very familiar signs. Shelves are not completely empty, but partially missing. Deliveries arrive slower. Shipments are smaller. And when they do arrive, they disappear within hours. No official announcement. No warning. Just that things are no longer as stable as before. And that is when you need to understand its real role. Canned tomatoes are not a staple food. They are not what keeps you full. But they are what help you keep eating for many days in a row without feeling discouraged. White rice cooked with water is just rice. But add tomatoes, it becomes a dish. Canned beans on their own are fairly bland. But add tomatoes, it becomes a stew. Pasta without sauce is just starch. But add tomatoes, it becomes a meal you actually want to eat. And this is something important that many people do not realize until they experience it. A crisis does not make you hungry first. It makes you bored first. When you eat the same thing repeatedly for many days, monotony begins to affect your mindset. You eat less. You lose your appetite. And that leads to lower energy, lower mood, and reduced resilience. A common mistake is people only buy enough for short-term use. That works when supply is stable. But when supply chains begin to break, you no longer control when it returns to the shelf. Canned tomatoes can usually maintain good quality for about 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer depending on conditions. But because of their high acidity, they are not something to store too long like dry foods. What matters is rotation. Use the older ones first. Replace with new ones later. Keep them in a cool, dry place. Avoid high temperatures to prevent affecting the lining inside the can. You do not need to stockpile too much. But you also should not wait until you need it to start looking for it. Each time you shop, add a few cans. Incorporate it into your meals to get used to it. And more importantly, see it not as something added for flavor, but as what keeps you able to keep eating over time. You can live without canned tomatoes, but you will not want to do that when options begin to disappear. 8. Cooking oil. If you go to the supermarket this week, look at the cooking oil section first. Not because it will be completely gone right away, but because it is one of the things that will disappear faster than you think and come back slower than you expect. 2 years ago, a gallon of vegetable oil was around $6. Today, that same size is commonly priced at $12 to $14, doubled in about 24 months. But like many items on this list, price is only the surface. What matters more is the instability of supply. Many stores have reported large bottles of oil completely disappearing from shelves for days, even weeks, before returning in very limited quantities. This is not happening by chance. It comes from multiple pressures at the same time in the global supply chain. Ukraine once accounted for a large portion of the world's sunflower oil supply. When that supply was disrupted, pressure shifted to other oils like palm oil and soybean oil. But palm oil has been facing production limits in some major exporting countries, while soybean prices have increased due to higher farming and transportation costs. When multiple alternatives face problems at the same time, the entire system begins to tighten. That is why you do not see completely empty shelves. You see partial shortages. You see smaller bottles still there, but larger ones missing. And that is not random. When supply is constrained, manufacturers prioritize smaller packaging because it brings higher profit. Large containers, the ones that are truly efficient for storage, are the first to be cut. And this is where many people misjudge. Cooking oil is not just for cooking. It is the most energy-dense source you can buy in a supermarket. 1 tablespoon of oil provides about 120 calories. 1 gallon contains nearly 30,000 calories. At current prices, the cost per calorie is still significantly lower than most other packaged foods. But more importantly is its biological role. Fat is not optional. Your body needs it to absorb vitamins A, D, E, and K. It is needed for hormones, for the brain, for the nervous system. A diet based only on rice, beans, and low-fat foods may keep you full, but cannot sustain long-term health. Within just a few weeks, you begin to feel fatigue, reduced focus, and a weakened immune system. The mistake many people make is thinking it is fine to go without oil for a while. That is only true in the short term. Another mistake is buying small bottles for convenience. But when you calculate by calories and usage time, small bottles are always more expensive and less efficient. And the biggest mistake is not rotating. Oil does not spoil immediately, but it does not last forever. Left too long in improper conditions, quality declines without you noticing until you use it. Proper storage is simple but requires discipline. Keep oil in a cool place, away from light and high temperatures. Do not store it near the stove or heat sources. A practical system is to always keep a certain reserve and rotate regularly, using older bottles first and replacing with new ones. Vegetable oil usually maintains good quality for about 1 to 2 years unopened, longer if conditions are stable. You do not need to overstock, but you also should not wait until shelves begin to empty before thinking about it. Because when oil starts to disappear, it is not the first sign of a problem, but often one of the last signs you notice. 7. Yeast. You can buy everything to make bread, except one thing. And when it is missing, everything else becomes meaningless. This is not a random disruption. It is a sign of a system moving out of balance. In North America, yeast supply does not come from hundreds of producers, as many people think. It is concentrated in a very small number of specialized factories with capacity designed for stable demand. The problem began in 2020 when demand surged. Retail yeast sales in the United States increased by more than 200% in a short time. Manufacturers were forced to expand production, but then they scaled back when demand cooled. What they did not account for is demand did not return to previous levels. A large portion of consumers continued baking, while production capacity had already returned to earlier levels. And that is the gap. A gap that cannot be resolved in a few weeks, but stretches for months. When you see a product appear and disappear from shelves repeatedly, that is not transportation. It is a sign of structural imbalance. A bread recipe only needs 4 things: flour, water, salt, and yeast. You can adjust ingredients, but you cannot skip yeast. And that is why a yeast shortage is not just about missing a product. It is the loss of the ability to create food from basic ingredients. A common mistake is relying on small retail packets. They usually last about 6 to 12 months. Many people buy them, store them, and only open them when needed, and nothing happens. No bubbles, no reaction, no bread. Meanwhile, bulk yeast stored cold or frozen can maintain activity for 4 to 5 years, replacing dozens of small packets at a lower cost. Storage is not complicated. Keep it dry, sealed, and cold. You do not need to buy a lot. But you need to understand this. When something this small disappears, what you lose is not the ingredient, but the ability to make what you need. 6. Bouillon bulk quantity. If you open your kitchen cabinet for a week and only have rice, beans, and a few cans of vegetables, you can still survive. But by the 5th day, you will begin to understand the problem is no longer a lack of food. It is a lack of reason to keep eating. Bouillon, those small stock cubes, is often seen as unnecessary. It is cheap, light, and almost invisible on the shelf. But because of that, when supply begins to shift, very few people notice what is happening until they need it. In the past, large boxes of bouillon, from 200 to 500 cubes, were always available at wholesale stores. But recently, many retailers have reported these formats completely disappearing from distribution channels, with no clear restock date. What is notable is that smaller packs are still available, but the type meant for real storage is slowly fading away. This is not random. When production and transportation costs increase, food companies tend to optimize products based on profit. Smaller retail packs carry higher margins per unit. Meanwhile, larger boxes, although more efficient for users, bring lower profit. When capacity is limited, these products are often cut first. But the reason bouillon appears on this list is not about supply chains. It is about its role in reality. 1 bouillon cube can turn a cup of water into flavored broth. With about 200 cubes, you can create 200 servings of broth at a cost far lower than canned broth. But the real value is not in cost. It is in the ability to transform everything else in your kitchen. White rice cooked with water is just rice. Rice cooked with broth is a meal. Canned beans on their own are a source of protein. Beans cooked with bouillon become something you can eat repeatedly for many days. Canned vegetables can be bland. But add broth, it becomes soup. And that is the difference most people do not realize until they actually experience it. In studies on nutrition and psychology under food-restricted conditions, one thing consistently repeats. People do not break down from lack of calories first. They break down from lack of variety. When meals repeat day after day, appetite fatigue sets in. Intake decreases. Energy drops with it, and morale begins to decline. Bouillon does not solve that problem entirely, but it slows it down significantly. In terms of storage, bouillon has a very clear advantage. Due to its extremely low moisture content, it can maintain good quality for 1 to 2 years, sometimes longer if kept in a dry and sealed environment. Moisture is the only factor to avoid, as it can cause the cubes to soften or clump. Keeping them in an airtight container, away from air and high temperatures, is enough to maintain stable quality. You do not need much space to store it. A small box can hold hundreds of servings. But the real value is not in quantity. It is in the fact that you can turn simple ingredients into something you still want to eat on the 10th day. 5. Canned butter. 2 years ago, a can of canned butter cost about $8. Today, in many places, it has risen to $14 to $18, if you can still find it. And that is not random fluctuation. It is a sign of a system tightening. In the United States, canned butter supply does not come from dozens of companies as many assume, but is concentrated among about 3 major producers. When a system has only a few supply points, it operates efficiently under stable conditions. But when problems occur, it does not have many options to recover. Recently, 2 of these 3 producers have faced disruptions. One facility had to shut down due to a production issue. Another faced a shortage of metal cans for packaging. When 2/3 of supply is affected, output does not drop slightly, but significantly. And that is when you begin to see a familiar pattern. Not items gone immediately, but arrivals slower, quantities smaller, and disappearing faster. Not because demand suddenly spikes, but because supply is no longer stable. But the reason canned butter appears on this list is not only about supply chains. It is about its nutritional role that most people do not consider. 1 tablespoon of butter contains about 11 to 12 grams of fat, providing dense energy and supporting the absorption of important vitamins such as A, D, E, and K. Meanwhile, most common stored foods like rice, beans, and canned vegetables provide almost no fat to sustain the body over time. You can still feel full, but you cannot maintain a stable condition. After a few weeks, the deficiency becomes clear. Energy levels drop, focus weakens, the body responds more slowly. This is not a problem of food quantity, but of nutritional structure, and that is the gap canned butter fills. In cool and stable conditions, canned butter can maintain quality for 5 to 10 years. Compared to fresh butter, which lasts only a few weeks in the refrigerator or a few months in the freezer before quality declines, this is a very large difference. Storage is not complicated. Just keep it in a dry place. Avoid high temperatures and direct light. When the packaging remains intact, the quality inside can be maintained for many years without additional handling. A small amount, added gradually and rotated properly, can create a layer of stability behind what you use daily. And in a system where supply begins to fluctuate, that stability becomes far more important than price or convenience. 4. Canned condensed milk with pull tab. You will not notice it disappearing until you need something you can use immediately and have no way to open it. In the past 12 months, prices for condensed milk and evaporated milk have increased by about 40 to 60% in many areas. But what matters more is not the price. It is the instability. There have been times when pull-tab versions nearly disappeared completely, while those requiring a can opener remained on the shelf. That is not a coincidence. In the canned food production chain, every small detail has its own cost. Pull-tab lids are not only more expensive, but also depend on separate supplies of metal and components. When costs rise and production is limited, factories prioritize simpler versions to maximize output. The result is a very quiet shift. The product still exists, but the most useful version starts to disappear first. Its role is not as simple as it looks. 1 serving of evaporated milk can provide about 6 to 8 grams of protein, along with calcium and essential fats. But the greatest value is flexibility. It can be consumed directly, mixed into milk, used in coffee, or cooked with. In limited conditions, a product that can serve multiple purposes always has more value than one that serves only a single use. The pull tab detail seems small, but it makes a significant difference. When you have no power, no tools, or need to use it immediately, opening a can becomes an important step, and you do not always have a choice. In terms of shelf life, condensed milk and evaporated milk usually maintain good quality for 12 to 24 months unopened. The key is to keep them in a cool, dry place and avoid high temperatures. Once opened, they should be transferred to a sealed container and used within a short time to maintain quality. A simple product, but in an unstable system, that simplicity becomes an advantage. 3. Honey in 1922. When archaeologists opened an ancient tomb in Egypt, they found jars of honey that had been sealed for thousands of years. And what surprised them was not that they were intact, but that they were still edible. That is not a story. It is data. While most foods in your home begin to lose quality after a few months or years, honey almost never spoils if stored properly. Not because of luck, but because of its structure, extremely low moisture, a naturally antibacterial environment. Bacteria cannot survive, and as a result, honey does not break down in the way you are used to. But the issue today is not how long it lasts. It is that it is gradually disappearing from places you once thought would always have it. In recent years, bee populations in the United States have declined by about 30% per year during certain periods. This is not a small fluctuation, and it does not only affect honey. Bees are part of the entire pollination system. When bees decline, agricultural output is affected. When agriculture is affected, the food supply chain begins to feel pressure, and that is not a small matter. At the same time, tighter import regulations have reduced external supply compared to before. When both domestic and imported sources are constrained, the system does not collapse immediately. It contracts, and it contracts in a very familiar way. Not disappearing completely, but disappearing in exactly what you need most. Small bottles are still there, but large containers, the type used for storage, begin to become scarce. And that is the signal. Honey is not just a sweetener. It is one of the very few foods that can provide fast, stable energy and be used immediately, without cooking, without preparation, without electricity. When you do not have a stove, do not have time. This is one of the few things that still works instantly. But its value does not stop there. In many situations, honey is not just food. It becomes something that can be traded, and sometimes it is what you use when you have no other options. Storage requires almost no technique. Keep it sealed, avoid moisture and high temperatures, and that is enough. Crystallization is not spoilage. It is only a physical change. Gentle warming restores it to normal use. Not many foods can last across generations. Not many things are both food, a source of energy, and a long-term reserve. And when something meets all of those conditions, it does not disappear loudly. And when you realize its value, it is usually when you no longer see it. 2. Whole wheat berries. A 25-pound bag of wheat berries used to cost around $12 to $15. Now, in many places, it has risen to $20 to $30. And what is notable is that you cannot always find these large bags. Unlike flour, whole wheat berries are unground, with minimal exposure to air, and that is what creates the biggest difference. Regular flour typically maintains quality for about 6 to 12 months, at most 1 to 2 years under good conditions. Meanwhile, wheat berries can be stored for 25 to 30 years if kept properly. This is not a small difference. This is the gap between short-term food and long-term foundation. The reason wheat berries are becoming harder to find is not only due to rising demand. It comes from the agricultural supply chain. Fertilizer, fuel, and transportation costs have all increased in recent years. When production costs rise, suppliers prioritize products with faster turnover, such as small packaged flour. Large bags of whole grain, although more efficient for storage, are pushed down the line. And that is why you are starting to see them disappear. The role of wheat berries is not in eating them directly. It is in their ability to be transformed. You can grind them into flour when needed, cook them as grain, or use them in various forms of preparation. When you store the grain instead of flour, you keep control over how and when to use it. For storage, the principle is very clear: dry, sealed, and cool. When stored in airtight containers, possibly with oxygen absorbers, wheat berries can maintain quality for decades without refrigeration. Moisture is the most critical factor to avoid, as it can spoil an entire batch in a short time. The solution is not to completely replace flour in your daily kitchen. It is to have a layer of reserve behind it. A sufficient amount, not used immediately, but always ready when external supply becomes unstable. You may not need to use it for many years, but that is exactly why it has value. 1. Long-term packaged bacon. If you overlook this, you will not notice it right away. But after a few weeks, your body will begin to respond. Most food storage systems share the same problem. A lot of carbohydrates, some protein, and almost no fat to sustain the body long-term. And that is the gap. One serving of packaged bacon provides about 10 to 15 grams of fat, significantly higher than vegetables or canned beans that contain almost no fat. In a single meal, this difference is not obvious. But after 2 to 3 weeks, it becomes a problem. Not because you lack calories, but because you lack what helps your body use those calories. Fat is necessary to absorb vitamins A, D, E, and K, maintain hormones, and stabilize energy. When lacking over time, the body begins to decline. Fatigue, difficulty focusing, weakened immunity. Long-term packaged bacon is not a common product. It is produced at limited scale, and recently, many manufacturers have shifted to restricted distribution or pre-order. When production faces issues, niche products like this do not disappear loudly. They disappear quietly. You will not see empty shelves. You will just see that you can no longer find it when you need it. Another factor often overlooked is taste. When meals repeat for many days, the issue is no longer having enough food, but whether you still want to eat. Bacon completely changes how a meal feels, and that helps you maintain consistent intake. In terms of storage, this product can be kept at room temperature for about 12 to 18 months if unopened. Just keep it in a cool, dry place and avoid high temperatures. Once opened, it should be used immediately or stored short-term in the refrigerator. You do not need much, but you need to understand its role. Because when your body begins to feel the deficiency, you usually no longer have many options to correct it. You just saw 10 foods, but what matters is not the list. It is how they disappear. Not gone completely, but slowly less. Not all at once, but step by step. You still go to the supermarket as usual. You still see full shelves, but each time you come back, there is a little less choice. And that is how things change. Slowly, just enough for you not to notice. Those who prepare do not buy more. They do not panic. They just do not wait. They understand one very simple thing. You do not lose food first. You lose choice first. And when you realize that, it is usually when you no longer have many options to fix it. The next time you stand in a supermarket, do not just look at what is still there. Pay attention. to what is no longer there. Because the difference is not in how much you have. It is in whether you are the last one to notice.